Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. It was dangerously close, this presentation to be retitled Rethinking the Keynote. I am in the many moments of transition right now. I've been in Washington, D.C. for 5 years. I'm now splitting my time between New York and D.C. I have a family in D.C. And we're packing to move to Connecticut. And guess who didn't renew their passport? And guess who thought you could use your license still? So over brunch on Sunday, my wife said, "You're sure you can use your license?" And I said, "Come on, Canada and US are partners, we're best friends. There's no way I need a passport for Canada." I went to Bing and found out that I needed a passport. So miraculously, given that the United States government in all functions takes decades to get anything done, I went in Monday morning, I had emailed Gwen and Idra and I said, "You better think about plan B. Could be Google Hangout, I'm happy to do that, but I may not be joining you," and which was stupid. But the Washington Passport Agency got a passport renewal done in 2 hours for me, which was amazing. Yes, government. And so I will leave them a 5-star Yelp rating when I get back. But it's great to be here. I have not been to Toronto, and I have not been to MagNet, and so these are great firsts for me. I'm excited to be here. When I accepted the opportunity and the honor to speak here at MagNet, I was the president of the Atlantic. I thought it would be strange to not talk about the Atlantic, even though my current employers may think it's strange I'm talking about the Atlantic. So don't tweet too much about what I say about the Atlantic, or at least don't tie it to me. But what we did there as a team, I think, is, I'll say I think it was a pretty amazing turnaround for a brand that lost well over $100 million in 10 years. I'll tell you all about that. I actually did a presentation down in Austin, Texas in March on the South by Southwest Festival where I talked for an hour about what we did there. I've taken that presentation because we have a soiree tonight and they didn't want to go to. And I've shrunk that down. And then I've added a little bit about Time Inc. and why I made the move. And then 10 considerations that I'll walk through. There is no digital strategy that I can unveil for Time Inc. Today. One, because I don't have one. And two, because we're in our quiet period right now. We are spinning off officially on Friday from Time Warner, our neglectful parent, who's been taking our free cash flow for 10 years to invest in television. And so, don't tweet that either. But it's true. And so we'll walk through that, and I think between the considerations and what we did at the Atlantic, you'll get a sense of what I hope to achieve at a company that's 7,000 people now, the largest magazine producer in the United States. So I've left some time, hopefully pre-soiree for questions. Lord knows you don't want to sit through 77 slides, and I'm sure there's things that you want to ask me about the Atlantic or Time Inc., and I'm happy to answer the ones that are not difficult. Brief introduction. My new title was President-elect. I am SVP of Digital for Time Inc. There's actually another one of me who sits on the lifestyle side of our business. So I oversee business, entertainment, news, and sports. Most of the big weekly brands that you're familiar with, which we'll talk a little bit more about. I've been doing digital media for 15 years, digital entrepreneurialism. I put this in here. I put the fact that I'm an entrepreneur, not a magazine guy, not a media guy, because I think when you see some of the philosophies that I have and some of the philosophies adopted at the Atlantic and what we'll do at Time Inc., I think you'll see where it comes from a little bit. I've done about 10 launches. Some of these brands that you see below are ones that I've been associated with. It's been a lot of fun. I've done a lot of redesigns and relaunches as well. I have 3 iPad-addicted children and a wife who doesn't touch it. And I'm a New York Rangers fan, sorry. Those from Montreal. I had to put that in there last minute. It's been 20 years since Messier brought us the cup. So hopefully I will not have to wait another 20. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did down at the Atlantic. It's helpful to get a sense of the importance of this task by going back a little bit in history. 1845, Scientific American, 1850, Harper's, 1857, The Atlantic. It was its ripe time in the United States for launching, and frankly around the world for launching newspapers and magazines. The Atlantic is the third longest contiguously published magazine in the country. The other two, which are still around, you don't hear nearly as much as you hear about the Atlantic these days, and it's precisely because of what we did, I think. It was founded in fall of 1857 by a bunch of old white men for the most part, the Transcendentalists. There was a woman, Harriet Beecher Stowe, was among them, but this was Ralph Waldo Emerson, Oliver Wendell Holmes, James Russell Lowell, some of the smartest thinkers of their time. They really wanted to found a platform for the American idea. They called it, this is a quote from the original mission, Journal of Literature, Politics, Science, and the Arts, to be the organ of no party or clique. They really wanted to have open, honest, objective debate to make what America, which was a young country back in the 1850s and on the eve of Civil War, a much better place. They really wanted to change the world. It was, from the get-go, even before these notable faces wrote for the Atlantic, arguably the brand that helped end slavery in the United States by helping get elected Abraham Lincoln. Its endorsement of him was critical to get the nomination. Teddy Roosevelt, W.E. Du Bois, Woodrow Wilson used the Atlantic as a platform for ideas. It was a place the Battle Hymn of the Republic in the Civil War by Dr. Howe was published. It was a place for great literature. Twain, Nabokov, Henry James, Robert Frost, many others. It was a place that Martin Luther King sent his letter from Birmingham jail. They kicked off the civil rights movement in the United States. It was, I'll leave it here because the declines. I probably should put one more slide in. I had to condense. My editing skills are not great. It was and is an important American institution and one that needed to be saved. But it was, no doubt, in an existential decline, and I don't care how rich you are, at some point when you're losing tens of millions of dollars a year, you're not going to continue it. And that would have been a shame given the rich history that I quickly glossed over. There's plenty more where that came from. The decline. Late 20th century, tons of magazines out there, a lot of competition, crowded newsstand, crowded subscription. Many of the companies that I've worked for, Condé Nast and Time Warner, or Time Inc. in particular, were buying their circ files. They were basically charging no money for the magazines just to get rate base. And then, of course, the biggest disruption of our times, the internet, which has forever changed the magazine business, but forever changed the newspaper business. It will finally change the TV business. We'll talk about that later. For the Atlantic, with print revenue sagging, with print circulation sagging a bit, and with an overinvestment with a cost structure that couldn't support it, money was flowing out the door. So, I'm going to fast forward over what we did and show you where we got, and then I'll come back. Digital traffic. When I got there in 2009, we probably had about 2 million unique visitors a month to our website. We had one website, theatlantic.com. Half of that traffic was a British conservative named Andrew Sullivan, who moved on from us during my tenure to the Daily Beast, and now is doing his own thing, which is something to watch because he's charging for the Daily Beast. He's charging for a blog, something I think is hopefully the beginning of a new trend. More importantly, revenue almost doubled over a 5-year period. It did not grow as fast as the traffic, unfortunately, but we broke even in 2010, and they are on pace for another record year if they get to the budget numbers that I left them with. If they don't, they will blame me for an over-aggressive budget, but I hear they're off to a great start, and I was there for Q1, so it's a great team, and hopefully they hit that number. This is probably before I got there, but it really was print revenue only, print advertising and print circulation in the mid-2000s. They were trying to reinvent the business, but they were still doing some traditional things. The present mix of revenue a healthier mix of revenue, as I call it here, is digital bigger than print in this mix, and events taking up about 20% of revenue. There's ancillary revenue that I've left out, but it's mostly digital. So you can see, I have left the Atlantic, where we had more digital revenue than print revenue, to a place where they're not even close. You can look at the financials when they come out. We've got a long way to go, but great brands do it. So what did we do? What was our strategy? What was our philosophy for that 5 or 6 years where we had a great team, that most of which we brought down from New York City, and earned me a big job and my boss a big job running Bloomberg Media. First thing was talent. Present company excluded, we kept a high bar on hiring talent. And this is a hard thing to do when you have open positions and you're carrying a load for somebody, but we didn't fill positions unless everybody felt like it was the perfect person. And that meant sometimes open positions sat around for 6 to 12 months. We were brutally demanding, I think, of our staff, but patient. You cannot be impatient and demanding. We want to ask people to go as far as they can, stretch them as far as they can. I'm going to mix up tenses, by the way, because I'm not part of the Atlantic. I might say we, but I was involved in it, so that's why. Hiring those that are smarter than you. Many people are worried about hiring their eventual replacement. In our company culture, if you had bad hires, it was a big negative mark against you, and you were rewarded for hiring great people. Flip the hierarchy. Once you hire those great people, let them do it. Let them actually make the decisions. Let them be out on the front lines. Raw talent over experience. This is a hard one in a room with people who've been in the industry for a long time. But our philosophy was to go after some really young, smart, aggressive people, not just because they were cheaper, which they were, but because we felt like we could train them the way we wanted to, and they didn't bring in some of the legacy thinking of the print industry. And culture, once you have all these great people, it's a full-time job to make sure that you've got a culture of innovation, a culture of collaboration. We spent a lot of time focused on this. How do you get ideas from the front lines? The pillars of the company, and this goes back to the owner, David Bradley, who bought the Atlantic, are spirit of generosity and force of intellect. So hire smart, nice people, no assholes allowed. And we really stuck to that for the most part. There's always some exceptions. Run the business like a startup. So if you're going to fend off a lot of competition, you have to start thinking about them. And yes, one of those things you've got to do is take a big chunk of cost out of the operating model. One of the things we did back in 2008 and 9, which led to us being able to break even and move into profitability, was we took a lot of cost out of the legacy business. And that meant there weren't 17 people doing photos. There were 3. And that was hard. It was hard to swallow. It was difficult. But it was, when you all know that there's an existential crisis, you do difficult things. And of course, if you don't have additional capital from outside, you got to take the money that you're pulling out of the legacy businesses and put it in the new business, and we invested heavily in digital. Challenge the status quo. All those startups up there, they're trying to take our magazine business away from us. They're challenging the way it's been done. They're trying to do things in a different way. If you're not playing around with Medium and Pitchfork and all these new things, you're missing out on some pretty interesting stuff. And I don't know if there'll be businesses and if they'll be around. Maybe they'll be acquired by people like Time Inc. But they're really interesting to watch. And we try to do the same. Speed and efficiency is a hallmark of a startup. They don't sit around and go through 27 bureaucratic meetings and have no owner and have 3 sign-offs. They get out there, they make changes. We did the same. Ignore the model. How many of you have actually looked back at a 5-year projection in the 5th year? And for those of you who have actually looked at the numbers 5 years later, were you anywhere close to those numbers? Probably not. You don't have to raise your hand, call yourself out. I can tell you, I've never done a 5-year projection that was really that close to what actually happened. So you can't base your decision on launching new products solely on some 24-year-old doing an Excel spreadsheet, but it's helpful to validate it. You need to think about cannibalizing yourself. One of the things we did really early at the Atlantic was say to the digital team, if you're good enough to take readership from the magazine, good for you. Because if you can do that with the Atlantic website, someone else is going to do it. And we'd rather be the one that can do it. So We gave them that freedom to do it. I see time and time again, I'm seeing in my new company, what does this mean for the magazine? Wrong question. Can't be asking that. And confidence is key, growing a thick skin. If you're a big company, if you're a legacy brand, you are going to do things that don't work. You're going to be criticized, especially on Twitter, by people who think they know your business, who cover the business. It's a pretty vicious media coverage that I see, especially out of New York. And you have to grow a thick skin. You've got to believe in yourself. Brand strategy. I think part of the reason I wanted to tell you about the history of the Atlantic was because for us, it was going back and figuring out who we were developing this product for. It was really knowing the audience. One might argue that in the past, there was too much of a reliance on programming for yourself. Editors would program content based on what they thought the audience. They didn't use it, wanted. They didn't have the data available. They might have had MRI, some biannual surveys, but I saw a lot of, well, we think this is the right content. We tried to go back, interview, focus groups, figure out what the core of the mission was, which gets to point two. We really went back to 1857. The reason that quote's on one of those preceding slides is because that's what we tried to stay true to. We're lucky enough to have a pretty noble mission, the Atlantic was, in changing America. But we all, whether it's sports or celebrity or whatever, horse manure, we all have our missions and it's important. Once you have a mission, we really sharpen our position in the marketplace, and that gets to creating a story. We had a great story, founded in 1857, important publication, making sure our audience, making sure our marketers and our agencies understood what that story was key. We're developing great materials, great branding, using PR effectively. It was a big part of the success. We also got outside our comfort zone and tried to stretch the brand a little bit by launching things like The Wire, City Lab, Atlantic City is now City Lab, on new platforms, and on Tumblr, and on Facebook, and on Flipboard. And not all of them had to be the same mission or voice, frankly, of the magazine. And we gave ourselves the liberty to do that, and what ended up happening was the sum of all of those different endeavors kind of strengthened the brand, in my opinion. And of course, this is an easy one. We tried to be very consistent with the Atlantic brand. The Atlantic website is not theatlantic.com, it's The Atlantic, it's the brand. It's the Atlantic Live Events Group. High design and consistency is obviously core to brand strategy, and I think we did a pretty good job there. The other thing that we pounded into the team was this mantra of digital first, which has become cliched at this point, clearly, and maybe it's mobile first at this point, but it was pretty important to get across to everybody at the Atlantic that no matter what, the future of media is digital, period, full stop. That's it. And that means bringing data into decision making. Product decisions, editorial decisions, sales decisions, IT decisions. That means high pace, high velocity. A lot of these are similar to, frankly, the startup slide, but it's the same idea. Most of the startups that we're all facing and fighting are digital. This is one of my favorites, holistic strategy to drive audience. When I got to the Atlantic, it was the editor's job to get people to the website. And that just did not seem to make much sense, given that developers can audience hack by writing programs and algorithms to pull audiences off of multiple platforms. You have audience development and biz dev, people that can strike deals to get traffic from portals. You've got salespeople that can do deals that enhance the brand with their marketing partners. And so we really tried to make it a goal that was shared among everybody. So everything you did, you were thinking about growing digital audience, because frankly, digital audience is the lifeblood of the digital business. And it's a lot cheaper if you understand how to use the levers than growing print circ file. Decentralize, specialize, flatten the bureaucracy, let people make decisions, specialize, get specialists in mobile, data, social, all of those things. Very difficult to teach people, even myself. I am not a data guy, so we would get a data guy to come in. And then create a sense of urgency for new products One thing that hasn't changed in the 15 years that I've been in this business, and probably for centuries before that, is people like new things. That's both consumers, or readers that we all try and create content for, as well as marketers. How many times have you heard from a marketing partner, can you do something for me that's never been done? Pretty much on every RFP we get in Time Inc. But consumers like it too. I mean, I'll use a few examples that have been launched in the last few years that everybody said, there's no way we can take another tech site, another business site in the marketplace. It's already crowded. The Verge, launched by Vox Media out of DC and New York, has 10 million unique visitors. It's a thriving business. Quartz, which I was part of launching, it's got a bigger audience than The Economist and FT online with 15 people. So I have never seen a market in digital too crowded to enter, period. You have to do a good job, you have to be unique, differentiate, be smart about it, but every time we enter a market that everyone tells us is crowded, it takes off. So I think people have an insatiable appetite for new. Diversify the revenue streams is a theme that you'll hear from me a couple times. We're well beyond being in the business, at least in the consumer side of circ and advertising, but even the B2B side too. You got to think about data, information, other services. For the Atlantic in 2013, we did 133 events. That's how we got to 20% of the revenue, and probably that was 50% of the profit. That's a lot of events. We had 25 to 30 full-time staffers doing it. But it's a great pillar of the multi-platform strategy, and it was important for us to kind of extend the brand. Launch sub-brands. We put The Wire out. We did the City Lab brand as well. We were trying to find new niches and opportunities that were consistent with the mission, the overall mission of the Atlantic. New platforms is obvious. Mobile. We went into Flipboard. We were one of the first brands to embrace Flipboard, even though most of the publishers in New York that I talked to were going to avoid it because they were going to steal the revenue. And I was, 150 million downloads later, they're all coming back to Flipboard because that's where the audience is, or there is a big audience there. And if you're not there with your content, somebody else will be there. Follow the money. We went into video probably a little bit too late. I'll talk about what we're doing in Time Inc. later, but this is the biggest pool of adjacent money. The US TV advertising market is $75 billion, which is a lot bigger than magazine advertising, and it's going to be disrupted, and so we all need to get over there who have a brand that can do video. Time Inc. has 50 recurring shows in production right now. We have probably 30 more that we're looking at internally and externally. The Atlantic, when I left, we had a bunch of recurring shows. The supply-demand economics and supply-demand in general is the only place in publishing that I can see that is favorable to a publisher. And the CPMs are still great. It's a matter of enough streams right now. Marketing solutions. Atlantic was very early pioneering native, sometimes back to confidence and thick skin, to the point of getting lambasted by the critics. But we moved aggressively because brands were already publishing their own content, and you gotta think innovative, you gotta move with the punches, the old rules don't apply. So we got into this, frankly, native advertising, content-based marketing has been around, it's been advertorial for 100 years. So we didn't think, as long as it's clearly delineated, there's any problem here. And Atlantic is probably 65% digital advertising is native right now, I would say. Time Inc., they're just getting off the ground. So that's an area opportunity that I look forward to working with the sales teams on. And adjacent fields, this is a phrase that my owner, previous owner, David Bradley coined, at least with us. And that is sort of like, video would be more of a related field. Adjacent field would be the adult education market. My view as president of the Atlantic was that people read the magazine to be smarter, to be challenged. They're not in school anymore, most of them that read the magazine. So why not do education? Why not both distance learning and in person? So we did a partnership with One Day University where we had the leading professors from around the country come in and teach their best class. And you paid $300, and we had 500 people. You could do the math. No sponsors in the first one. And they loved it. It was great. And you could scale that business if you roll it out across the country. And believe me, the professors were excited to be paid to teach. So that was basically what we did. Those were the core elements of what we did. Things were going great. Great story, great narrative. I get invitations like this being, why would I leave that to go to 7,000 bureaucratic people? No. I will tell you why I did it. Part of it was personal. I'm actually from the New York area. I spent most of my career in New York. And while we had a big presence in New York City, I could not have operated the Atlantic from New York City. So I was eager to get back to my friends, family, and my network. I was also drawn to another institution that has a rich history. Henry Luce founded Time Inc. in 1922, so it's coming up on its 100th anniversary. He also founded Fortune and People and Sports Illustrated, great iconic brands that meant something then and still mean something today, even if they have lost their way a little bit in this changing world. It also has, I think worldwide, 95 different brands, many of which are in the IPC Media Group in the UK. But you can see some of these brands. They're really strong with passionate readers. And unfortunately, they haven't pivoted to digital hard enough. And so they've ceded a lot of territory, which is what's exciting. It also is a company that has a lot of, and this is not a commercial for Time Inc., but it has other businesses too. Global footprint, marketing services, content services, targeted media, data. And so it's positioned, if all of these things could work well together with a better digital strategy, to actually start making more than, I think it's $400 million a year, which is a lot of money in free cash flow, but it's been shrinking because of the print shrinkage. Reach, this is another reason. The Atlantic, which grew so beautifully to 25 million unique users, and that was an internal figure. This is a ComScore figure, so it's a lot bigger than this if you use Omniture numbers. 125 million individual people is a pretty big number. And in digital, scale matters big time, especially as the business of advertising moves programmatically, which I will tell you later is inevitable. 105 million print subscribers, 88 million unduplicated people across mobile and desktop, 54 million on mobile devices across all our brands. The most important thing that they have, though, is 150 first-party data records on current and previous subscribers. And if we can leverage that first-party data, it's going to be a huge, huge advantage. They have not invested in it. I know Condé Nast did. When I was there 10 years ago, they spent probably $20 or $30 million doing this, and it's paying handsome dividends for cross-marketing purposes, for advertising targeting purposes, all kinds of things. So that is a big project. It's underway, and I think given that third-party data, the likes of BlueKai, which have served a valuable resource, is basically used by everybody, commoditized. First-party data is going to be huge. You get a lot of it. The final reason I went to Time Inc. was the challenge. The top two lines there are print advertising and print circulation. This is a Pew Internet Report projecting out through 2016. It's actually not a horrible story if you believe their projections, that it's not as if the print magazine business drops off the face of the earth, but it's not going to grow. And this shows a sort of steady drumbeat of decline. In the models that we do, we project a faster decline than this. The problem is that bottom line is not growing fast enough. That's digital revenue. It's not only not replacing the lost revenue from print, but it's certainly not making up for it on the top line. So what we need to do, what my job is no less than creating a new curve that has more of a 60 to 70% angle, which one might say that's impossible. But with $400 million in free cash flow, I hope we can make some acquisitions. In fact, we made one yesterday, which speaks a little bit to where we're going as a company and a little bit to what I'm talking about in the last section of my presentation. We bought Cozy, which is a Seattle-based family planning and organizational app. Mobile first, 10 million families using it, or 10 million people perhaps. Has nothing to do with the magazine business, but it fits beautifully in with a lot of our magazine brands and the passionate families that read Real Simple or Our Home and the other brands at Time Inc. owns. So we've got a big task ahead of us, but that was the reason I felt like this was the right time for the right move to get back to New York. How do we do what we did at the Atlantic on a scale that is far, far bigger and far more complicated? So, since I don't have a digital strategy that I can share, or don't have one in general yet, although I've been asked about a dozen times by the CEO and CFO and CTO, so I probably should get on this. It's a little complicated given each brand has its own strategy, redefining each of the brands digitally, but also there's some holistic stuff across brands that I want to do. So this is not by no means meant to be the only things that I'm thinking about or we should be thinking about as an industry, but it's 10 considerations. I could have done 20, but there's a soiree tonight, and I did not want to hold you up. So the first thing is we have to all agree we are not in the magazine business anymore. My title of my speech today is Rethinking the Magazine. We need to come up with a different term, and the term is we are media companies. For us at Time Inc., and these are our brands and our partnerships, we are a magazine company. Yeah, we have magazine products, Sports Illustrated, Time are highlighted there. We are a news business now. We are a newspaper, if you want to say that, except we don't have paper. Time is producing 200 or 300 pieces a day now. You probably didn't know that. Fortune is going to be doing, we just relaunched Fortune on Sunday. Part of the spin-off, part of the stress. I'm actually only 30 years old, I look about 50. Might be the kids too. Fortune's going to be up to about 100 pieces a day covering business news globally. People does, I think they told me 3,000 pieces a month, but a lot of those are slideshows because it's celebs and slideshows work. But the sheer volume and reporting, second-party reporting, not necessarily a lot of original breaking journalism, turns us into an entirely different animal that frankly competes with the New York Times or any other the Daily Mail, any of those publications. We're a TV business as well. We will launch the Daily Cut, which is a web app, mobile app for the 50 shows at some point this year. It was introduced at what they call the upfront, the NewFront. It's our answer to the television industry. It is basically a window into seeing the shows, those 50 shows I mentioned. You'll be able to go through like a remote control and watch Rachel Hatch talk about fixing your closet. Rachel Dratch, sorry, from Saturday Night Live, and other things like that. So we'll see how that goes. We're also doing an interesting deal with 120 Sports, where all the major American sports leagues, except the NFL, because they never do anything first. They're an 800-pound gorilla, unfortunately. We're going to be trying to recreate ESPN SportsCenter for the mobile generation. So you'll see 120 is actually 120 seconds. You'll see 2-minute clips and analysis and live game look-ins. It should be interesting, and it launches pretty soon. And we're in the retail business as well. We've got this amazing partnership. This is an area where a lot of ink has been spilled, talking about how publishers need to become e-commerce engines. And there are very few examples of where this has actually been a noticeable revenue driver. All of my experience is it's basically an affiliate program where you can make 5% by sending people to Amazon or wherever else we're going to send them now that he's screwing over Hachette. But this is actually really interesting. Joyous, really brilliant CEO, worked at Google and a few other places, has created basically what I would call QVC, if you're familiar with it, for the digital age. And so you actually connect with an editor, effectively, who's telling you this is the best lip gloss to buy, and they built a really slick e-commerce engine on top of it. They actually inventory and then ship, and sometimes they drop ship from the producer. This is actually working really well. We've deployed it on people.com, which has 25 million people a month. And the effective CPM just running one of those videos is $350 CPM. So that's pretty good when people talk about single-digit CPMs in publishing. That's just one example of an area. I don't know how scalable it is. I don't know if it translates into sports and other places, but they're actually Time Warner invested in them, and they're working with us right now. So it's really interesting. I didn't put data on here. I didn't put services, B2B services, but those are all part of what a media company needs to do to not only survive, but thrive. I already said this before, but we have to just assume we're not a magazine company and that print is in terminal decline. We can optimize, we can do better, we can create a print magazine product for the digital age, but we cannot assume that we're ever going to see those lines bounce. Believing that frees you up to think about new. I also believe that all digital advertising, standardized, will go through the programmatic ad exchanges, which one would argue, most people would argue, then drives down the CPMs. I think we're just in an interesting transitionary phase. I think we'll actually be able to strike direct deals with big publishers, big advertisers. We actually are starting to do this. And so CPMs hopefully will go up. There's this big movement going on. I don't know how much is going on in Canada, but in the US about viewability of ads and fraud. And I expect to start seeing RFPs where the agencies are demanding at least 70% of the ads are shown, actually viewed by somebody who's not a robot, and are above the fold and in the stream, and that's going to change the business. And I think will also benefit premium publishers that are not trying to set up websites to catch social and search traffic and just generate 10 ads a page. So I hope this is a drive to premium. I put 3 screenshots out here to illustrate what I mean by the stuff that we need to be doing. Big, that's on the upper left, InStyle, big relationship with Tiffany, big ad units. There's other parts of the campaign that are really interesting and profound and impactful. The second one underneath it is a native advertising solution that we're running on time.com for BSP, which is really interesting and interactive and fun and gets a much higher engagement rate than banner ads. And then the final thing is probably the most interesting. This is a partnership that People has with a company called Husei. Husei is aggregated a bunch of celebrities who have an app, and when they want to connect to their audience on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, and every other social platform, including people.com, they write up a message and they tweet it from this app. They don't go to Instagram or Facebook. They do this because there's a lot of data that Husei provides back. It's a safe environment. They know where they're going. They can send it to 10 places at the same time. And they also are given opportunities for product placement. So if you're Gwyneth Paltrow and you love Dunkin' Donuts, you can do a Dunkin' Donuts tweet out to your millions of followers. And maybe Chris will retweet it. That's pretty interesting. If you're People, you say, holy, you mean advertisers can go around the celebrity thing to the celebrities and they don't need people? Yeah, so that's why we're partnering with them. That's the kind of innovative thinking and outside of the box thinking that I think is critical. In the past, I think working in such a product placement driven partnership would have turned off most of the editors. I don't think at this point they're much more open-minded, as you might imagine. 3, and therefore you'll hear, this is probably the third time I've said it, diversification of revenue streams. This is not, for us in the consumer business, this is not optional. This is mandatory. And so I am actually pleasantly surprised to see a lot of activity going on in Time Inc., Fortune Most Powerful Women. I'll pause there for a second. Franchises, amid all of the noise in media today, are still home runs for advertisers and people love. We just put Fortune 500 up on Fortune.com. Of course, it was kind of broken because we just launched the site, but we're getting millions of people in there. Everyone's tweeting it. Get all of our writers on television to talk about it, and of course, we got sponsorship for it. It's just they really, really work. And then you can build the live events through product enhancement off of it, which we do. So that still works. Golf Magazine, which is in a declining business, golf is not necessarily a booming sport these days, has a players club where you are a member and you actually get tee times and equipment. They're trying to reposition themselves as a service business. I mentioned Joyous, real simple, sending boxes around of interesting products. People has a premium channel where the editor-in-chief, Jess Cagle, will pick some products and you get additional content. I don't think they've nailed the model, but they're experimenting. This is my favorite one. Don't focus on strategy so much. I've watched several companies bring in consultants, pay them millions of dollars and spend 12 months gathering 350 slides for PowerPoint, and none of it actually gets implemented. I've seen this happen over and over again. And I love consultants, don't get me wrong, but there is a belief system sometimes in these bigger companies that these outsiders can come in and figure it all out, and they'll use that plan. It's really going to transform the business. I've yet to see it, no offense to any consultants here, and it has to really come from within. I think they can be good facilitators and help. By the way, if you do 12 months and you do 375 slides, it's probably outdated by the time you're finished with it, 12 months later in this digital world. I also believe strongly, culture again, trumps strategy every day. It's the people that you putting in, that great talent on the front lines, that's going to go a little bit left and a little bit right every single day. And by the end of the 5-year period of your big digital strategy or big media strategy, you're probably going to end up in a much different place than you thought. And it's going to be because of those great people that have moved you that direction. You can retroactively write your strategy once you get there. I'm a huge believer in this. You got to execute and operate. I'm also a huge believer in quality. There's a lot of talk about cutting costs and what's that effect on content in media companies like Time Inc. I think if we lose quality, we lose business, honestly. There's too much stuff out there. I can go home tonight after a few of those Appletinis. I can write a post on Medium and it won't be that good, I promise. And that's what's going on all over the place. And that's just not good enough. And I don't think it's a sustainable business model. But I do think quality drives trust with a passionate audience. I think it elevates the brand. I think people will pay for it. Mentioned Andrew Sullivan before. Look at the New York Times. Almost 800,000 people incrementally paying for the newspaper. These are unique, yes, but if we're not doing anything unique, I'm not sure why, honestly, we're doing it. These are just some screenshots of some of the good stuff that's going on at Time Inc. through Fortune, Time, and Sports Illustrated. I have a theory, and probably someone will tell me this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I believe it. It's called my virtuous cycle of journalistic sustainability, and it starts with great content. And this has been born from Condé Nast with launching Portfolio and shutting down Portfolio, turning around the Atlantic, and then at Time Inc. But it really starts with great content. We'll find an attractive, I put that in parentheses because it's important, the right audience, the attractive audience. That will drive marketer interest in this audience and an opportunity to monetize it differently. If you're smart, that'll drive revenue, hopefully. If you're smart, it will drive profit for the business, which then you can reinvest back in quality content. And so you see how that virtuous cycle can work. I think it can work the other way around too. If you put out garbage, I think you're going to get garbage audience, and I don't think you're going to get marketers to care, and I don't think people are going to pay for it, and then you're going to have no profit, and you won't be able to invest, and so it can unwind itself. But I'm a big believer in that. S-curve. I'm almost done, I promise. I'm doing all right. Soirees in 10 minutes. This is business school jargon, but the S-curve is sort of the life cycle of a business. Again, this is one way to represent it. What you see, a lot of companies start off slow, they then have a fast growth period, then they tail off, and perhaps they decline. And that's the S. Pretty common. 91% of companies fail when they're disrupted in any industry. It's as Clayton Christensen at his finest. We have to jump the S-curve. We need to find another curve. Yes, we have to optimize our businesses and find a better way to produce content for our brands and the cheaper way and sell more advertising. Yes, yes, yes. But we also have to figure out where else to go. And I put up 3 screenshots of businesses that Time Inc. should have launched. Could have launched, I should say. Not should have. Because if you've read The Innovator's Dilemma, also by Clayton Christensen, you find out why big companies can't do this. Guilt should have been launched by InStyle, or something similar to it. This is a flash sale for mostly women's goods, but it has men's products too. LinkedIn, you all know, you're all on it, I'm sure. Could have been launched by Fortune. Bravo TV could have been a People or EW production. The reason, there's 2 primary reasons why they're not Time Inc. properties. One is they thought of themselves as a magazine company. Why would you do that? And number 2, they didn't have the facility, the culture, and the dollars to frankly do it, or the right organizational structure. Number 7 consideration, I think for all those of us who are doing video, I think we need to do it more and faster and better. Again, where else are you going to find $75 billion just sitting there waiting to be disrupted? And how great if newspapers and magazines, which were disrupted by the internet, and all these startups can actually disrupt the TV business. Sorry if you own TV channels, but we don't. This is a chart of, thank you Henry Blodgett, of video views. The last 3 years, monthly video views. There's no secret here. People are consuming a ton of video. This is the video ad forecast in the US market for the next, through 2016. That's a lot of money, $9 billion. So we need to get our fair share of it. And I think there's no reason with a trusted brand and great journalism, great editorial, that we can't be there. Mobile, you hear that a lot being in our business, but it is not just an extension of our desktop. It's not just repurposing content in an adaptive, responsive way. It's the future, honestly. I have brands right now that are well over 50% consumption on mobile, and almost all of that is smartphones. You can see here, that blue section, this is billions of minutes in December, 442 billion on smartphones, smaller screens. Tablet is growing well as well, but it's much smaller, it's dwarfed. And actually desktop grew a little bit. This is December 10 through December 2013. The action is going to be on the smartphone. And by the way, I do not believe this. People read 10,000 word articles on smartphones. I am not one of them, but they do. And it's shocking. It's also, whenever you have eyeballs, which is sort of an out in front leading indicator, it takes a little time for the revenue and the ad units and the agencies and everybody else to get in line. But you can look, it's hard to read maybe, but I'll summarize it. Mobile growth for the next 5 years is charted to be 83%, 46, 35, 26, 23. Desktop advertising in the US, 23, -2, -2, -5, -7, -10. This is not print, this is digital. So where do you want to play? We need to be a lot further along in mobile than we were, than we are, and than we were when the web came the first time. I liken this transformation that we're going into right now as very similar to the internet disrupting print. And Lord knows magazines and newspapers did not react fast enough. So we've got to get out there. Otherwise Facebook and everybody else is going to take this marketplace. Number 9, take the social web even more seriously. I pithily joked at the South by Southwest that our social strategy was to make great content and people who read The Atlantic would share it. That's great and that's true. What I learned when I got to Time Inc. over the last 2 months is we have some brilliant people that are doing some really interesting tactics, testing velocity, how many posts a day on Facebook, looking at the data, really analyzing the data on a sort of real-time basis. They are far more advanced than we were at The Atlantic, and this is great. Of course, that's on only some of the brands, not all of them, so I need to figure out how to propagate and socialize. That's one of my jobs. This is a chart from Parsley Dash, which is actually a really cool analytics tool if you're not using it. On the bottom is January, and 30% of traffic to sites in their network was search and 32% in social. In March, probably driven by some news events, search actually was a bigger driver than social. So search is not dead. I think that Time.com, keep this to yourself, don't tweet it, got 20 million referrals last month from search. So that's huge. That's bigger than the amount of referrals The Atlantic got from any source. And there are different strategies for both. So you need to have people that understand these. The Upworthies and the BuzzFeeds are the most amazing stories. Social, Viral Nova, Policy Mike. You need to understand what they're doing to game this. It's technology, but it's also tactics. And we can look down our nose at them for content quality, but if we have content quality plus the tactics that they're employing, think about the size of our brands. And many of them, by the way, won't be around. Will be around, hopefully, a lot of the great historic brands, but we can't see that much territory digitally to these guys. The final point I want to make is looking beyond our shores, and as someone born and bred in the United States, you might roll your eyes because we always think about US, and in fact some of my slides were US. But if you look at the ad spend, and this is not consumer revenue, this is not paid product, this is just ad spend, which is a big part of the business. What you see in 2014 is that North America is $192 billion, and the full market worldwide is 564. My math is probably a little off, but I'm gonna say that's $370 billion that most of us are not getting, and we need to get it. And in particular, it's Asia and Western Europe. It's not easy to get. The Wall Street Journal and plenty of publications have been out that I'm aware of launching localized versions and have gotten some of it, but struggle. This may have to be acquisition, but there's money out there to be had, and the U.S. market is so competitive, the North American market is so competitive that one can't overlook $370 billion that we're not really touching. So that is that. I'll say after all of that, and if they're thinking about this, if there's one concluding sort of thought or statement I would make, and then I'm happy to answer any questions as long as they're easy, is that I'm actually really optimistic, and maybe by nature as an entrepreneurial type, and someone that would leave the comforts of the Atlantic to go to timing, that seems, par for the course, but I think we're at a great time right now. If we can just open up our minds to what we are, not what we were, and think about the audience that care deeply about the publications that we produce, think openly about the number of products that we could launch that are not magazine products, then I think we have a bright future. It's going to get smaller, our business, before it gets bigger, that's for sure. But that's okay. At the end of the day, if we can drive profits and drive engagement with our users, we can build back up as this big wave of digital disruption sort of moves through and we process it. And a lot of, obviously, media companies will go out of business over time. And I think a lot of these upstarts will be gone. Hopefully there's a content bubble right now. Anybody who offered BuzzFeed $1 billion. You can't traditionally call bubbles, but I will call one today. So anyway, that's my parting thought. I'm super optimistic. I hope there were at least some takeaways that were interesting here, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have. So.